The man opened his eyes to blinding white lights above him. At first, he thought he was dreaming, but the cold sting of metal against his back told him it was real. He tried to move, but something held him down. Straps dug into his wrists, his ankles, his chest. Thin wires ran into his skin, glowing faintly as strange machines hummed all around. He turned his head slowly and saw shadows moving behind glass. Alien voices whispered, high and sharp, in a language he could not understand. His heart pounded. He had no idea where he was, or how he had come here, but he knew one thing for certain: this was not Earth. The sound of dripping liquid echoed somewhere close, mixed with the steady hum of alien engines. The air was cold, too clean, and it smelled of chemicals. The man blinked hard, trying to clear his vision, and caught a glimpse of his own reflection in a polished panel beside the bed. His face was pale, his lips dry, his body thin. Something had been done to him. He tried again to move, to tear free, but the straps only cut deeper. He stopped, breathing hard, forcing himself to stay calm. Panic would not help him. He had to think. The shadows grew closer. The glass door hissed open and 3 creatures stepped inside. They were tall, their skin gray and slick like wet stone. Their heads were long, their black eyes unblinking. They wore no clothes, only thin plates of metal strapped across their bodies. Each carried a device that glowed with shifting colors. They moved without sound, only the faint clicking of their claws touching the floor. One leaned over him, its face inches from his own. The alien's breath smelled like burning metal. It spoke again, fast, sharp, its words strange and broken to his ears. The man did not answer. He closed his eyes, pretending to be weak, pretending to be asleep. He knew soldiers who had done the same when captured: play dead, play broken, wait for the right moment. The creatures did not trust him. He could feel it. Their voices rose, urgent, as they looked at the wires in his arms. A screen lit up with symbols, red warnings flashing. One of the aliens jabbed a claw toward the display, its voice rising higher. Another tapped a code into a panel. The machines around him made new sounds: beeps, alarms, mechanical sighs. The man's chest tightened. Something about his blood, something inside him, had set them on edge. He watched their hands. They trembled. These beings were not calm scientists at work. They were nervous. They were afraid. He could see it in the way their black eyes shifted from him to the machines and back again. But why? He was strapped down, helpless. What did they see in him that frightened them so much? A tube of glowing blue liquid was raised above him. The alien pressed a button and the fluid began to drip into his veins. His arm burned, his heart raced. He bit his lip, forcing himself not to cry out. Whatever they wanted from him, it was inside this liquid. But his body did not respond the way they expected. He could feel something stirring deep in his muscles, a fire burning hotter than pain. His skin tightened, his breath grew faster. Every nerve screamed at him to fight. The aliens leaned back, watching the screen. Their voices grew frantic. Something was wrong. His body was rejecting their control. The man opened his eyes wide, staring at them now, no longer pretending. For the first time, the creatures stepped back. They looked at him not as prey, not as a subject, but as a danger. He felt it in the air: the balance had shifted. He was no longer the one trapped. They were the ones who had made a mistake. He tested the straps again, this time not with fear but with focus. He pulled against the one around his right wrist, slow and steady. The material stretched. His skin tore. Blood ran down his arm. But the strap did not break. He growled, low in his throat, and pulled harder. Muscles bulged, veins throbbed, his teeth clenched. Then, snap. The strap tore open like brittle plastic. His right arm was free. The aliens cried out in alarm, claws tapping furiously at the panels. The machines shrieked with warning tones, lights flashing red across the lab. The man lifted his arm, trembling with both pain and power. He stared at his free hand, at the blood dripping from his wrist, and felt something new rise in his chest. He was not weak. He was not helpless. Whatever they had done to him, whatever they had tried to change, had failed. They had given him strength instead. Slowly, He clenched his fist, testing his grip. The strap on his left wrist seemed thinner now, weaker. He knew he could break it too. The aliens were shouting, running for the door, calling others. But it was too late. The man turned his head, locked eyes with the one closest to him, and smiled through blood and sweat. The creature froze. The man whispered, voice hoarse but steady, "You should have left me sleeping." And with that, he tore at the second strap, the sound of ripping metal echoing through the cold, white lab. The battle had not started yet, but already the walls of this place trembled with fear of the human they thought they could control. The alarm screamed across the alien lab, filling the room with red flashes that pulsed like a heartbeat. The man sat up on the metal table, his chest heaving, his skin slick with sweat. His left wrist was still trapped, as were his legs, but one arm was free, and that was enough. He gripped the strap at his other wrist, twisted, and pulled until the material cracked apart. His hands were bloody, but he barely felt the pain. He swung his arms down, tearing the last bindings from his chest and ankles. For the first time since waking, he was standing, his bare feet pressing against the cold floor. The machines around him whined, lights flickering, as if the very ship itself knew something had gone wrong. He staggered at first, his legs weak, his head dizzy, but he caught himself against the table. Then he looked around, really seeing the lab for the first time. Rows of tall glass pods stretched along the walls, glowing with blue light. Inside each pod floated a body. Human bodies. Men, women, even children. Some were alive, their eyes moving slowly under closed lids. Others were motionless, pale, their skin stretched too thin, like dried husks. The man's stomach twisted. He was not alone here. He pressed his hand against the glass of the nearest pod. A young woman floated inside, her hair drifting in the liquid, her lips barely moving as if whispering in a dream. He tapped the glass. Her eyes opened for a second, wide with shock, before closing again. His chest tightened. These people were prisoners just like him. Test subjects. The aliens were not only experimenting on him, they were experimenting on all of humanity. The door hissed open. A group of guards stormed in, their weapons raised. Their armor was black, their rifles glowing with pale energy. They shouted in their sharp language, pointing their weapons at his chest. The man looked at them, then at his blooded hands. He had no weapon, no shield. But something deep inside told him he did not need one. His body itself was enough. The guards fired. Blue bolts of plasma shot through the air, sizzling past him, striking the pods. Glass shattered, liquid spilled out, and a man tumbled onto the floor, coughing and screaming. The prisoner was alive. The man rushed forward, ignoring the burning heat of the shots that grazed his skin. He slammed into the first guard, ripping the rifle from its claws and swinging it like a club. The alien crumpled to the ground with a crack of bone. The others fired again, but he had already thrown himself to the side, rolling across the floor. He gripped the rifle awkwardly, pointing it at the nearest guard. He had never held such a weapon before, but instinct guided his hand. He pulled the trigger. A beam of energy blasted into the alien's chest, throwing it back against the wall. The sound was deafening. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. The others froze for a split second, and that was all he needed. He lunged, tackling another to the ground, smashing its head against the floor until it stopped moving. The last two fled, screeching as they ran for the door. He let them go. He had no time to chase them. The man dropped the rifle, breathing hard. He turned back to the pods. The human who had fallen out of the shattered glass lay on the floor, coughing weakly, his body thin and frail. The man knelt beside him, lifting his head. "Stay with me," he whispered, though he had no idea if the stranger could hear. The man's eyes opened, cloudy and desperate. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. His body shook once, then went still. The man held him for a moment, his teeth clenched, before gently laying him down. Rage burned in his chest. These aliens had stolen people from Earth, had caged them, tortured them, drained them until nothing was left. They had taken families, children, lives. And for what? For science. For war. He stood, fists clenched, his blood mixing with the liquid spilling from the broken pod. He looked around at the other prisoners. Some still floated in their cages, still alive, still waiting. He swore to himself he would not let them die here. The alarms grew louder. The floor vibrated beneath his feet. More guards would come. He needed to move, to find a way to free the others. He stumbled through the rows, searching for a release switch, a control panel, anything. His eyes landed on a console glowing with alien symbols. He slammed his hand against it. The screen flashed red, symbols shifting. More alarms blared. He hit it again and again, finally tearing the panel off with his bare hands. Wires sparked, smoke filled the air. A hiss came from behind him. He spun around. One of the pods opened slowly, steam pouring out. A woman collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. She was thin, barely able to lift her head. He rushed to her side, pulling the wires from her arms, helping her sit up. Her eyes, wide and terrified, met his. She whispered a single word, weak but clear, "Why?" He had no answer. He could only shake his head, gripping her hand tightly. The ground shook again, stronger this time, as if the entire ship was preparing for war. Somewhere above them, heavy doors slammed shut. He knew the aliens were locking down the lab, sealing them in. The woman tried to stand but fell back against him. He lifted her carefully, his muscles aching. He looked at the rows of pods, at the faces still trapped inside. He could not save them all. Not yet. But he could save some. He could fight. He stepped forward, carrying her in his arms, his eyes burning with fury. Behind him, the bodies of the guards lay scattered. Around him, the pods glowed like silent tombs. Ahead of him, the alarms screamed, promising more enemies. He whispered to himself, to the woman, to all the prisoners still asleep, "I'll get you out. I'll burn this place to the ground." And with that, he marched toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. The door slid open with a hiss, and the man stepped through, carrying the weak woman in his arms. The corridor beyond was long and narrow, glowing with blue light that pulsed along the walls like veins. The alarms followed him, echoing through every corner, and the floor trembled under his bare feet. He could feel the ship reacting to him, as if it were alive, as if it feared what was now loose inside its body. The woman in his arms stirred weakly, her head resting against his shoulder, her breathing shallow. He moved faster. From the end of the corridor came the sound of heavy steps, claws clicking against metal. A squad of alien guards appeared, their armor thicker, their weapons larger than the ones he had already faced. Their eyes locked on him and the woman, and their voices rose in sharp commands. He understood nothing of their words, but he understood their intent. They wanted him dead. They wanted her returned to the pod. The man lowered the woman gently against the wall, whispering, "Stay down. Don't move." Her wide eyes followed him as he turned to face the soldiers. He picked up the rifle he had stolen earlier and raised it, his hands trembling, his body aching. The guards shouted, spreading out, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. The first shot came fast, a streak of blue that burned across his shoulder. He gritted his teeth against the pain and fired back. The beam of energy slammed into one of the guards, sending it crashing into the wall, its armor smoking. The others fired at once, filling the corridor with blinding light. He threw himself sideways, the rifle nearly ripped from his hands as bolts seared past. The smell of scorched metal and flesh filled the air. He rolled behind a support beam, firing again. His shot caught another guard in the throat, and it collapsed in a spray of sparks and blood. The others advanced, their steps heavy, their voices rising in battle cries. The man's chest heaved, his hands shaking, but his eyes burned with focus. He was fighting not just for himself, but for the humans still trapped in those pods. Every shot, every strike, was for them. When his rifle clicked empty, he didn't hesitate. He hurled it at the nearest guard, then charged, his bare feet pounding against the floor. He slammed into the alien's chest, grabbing its rifle and twisting it away. The alien hissed, clawing at him, but he drove his elbow into its throat, then its jaw, until it crumpled. He seized the fallen weapon and turned it on the others. The corridor lit up with fire, each blast echoing like thunder. Bodies fell, one after another. The man moved like he had never moved before, faster, stronger, more precise than he ever thought possible. He ducked under beams, rolled past claws, and struck with a fury that shocked even himself. When the last guard fell, the corridor was filled with smoke and silence. He stood there, chest heaving, his skin scorched and bleeding, but alive. His eyes scanned the carnage, his hands still gripping the alien rifle. The woman whimpered softly from where she lay against the wall. He rushed back to her, dropping the weapon and kneeling at her side. Her skin was pale, her breath weak, but she was still alive. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering, "We're still here. We're still fighting." Her lips moved faintly, though no sound came. He knew she was slipping, her body too weak from whatever the aliens had done to her. He clenched his jaw, rage and grief boiling inside. He would not let her die. He lifted her again, but as he did, he noticed something on the wall ahead. A wide window of glass stretched across the corridor, showing the endless black of space. Beyond it, the curve of a planet glowed in the distance, its surface a swirl of green and blue. For the first time since waking, he realized where he was, not in a building, not on Earth, but on a ship. A ship orbiting a world that was not his own. His stomach turned cold. How far from home was he? How many humans had been taken? He tore his eyes from the view and focused on the woman in his arms. He could not think about the galaxy, not yet. First, he had to survive. He moved forward again, stepping over the fallen guards. His body throbbed with pain, but adrenaline pushed him on. Ahead, another door hissed open, and this time the sound was different, heavier, slower. From the shadows emerged a towering figure, larger than the others, its armor plated with jagged metal. Its eyes glowed red, and in its hands was not a rifle but a massive blade, humming with energy. The man froze, his breath catching. This was no ordinary guard. This was a commander. The commander pointed the blade at him and spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. Though he could not understand the words, the meaning was clear: surrender, or die. The man set the woman down gently once more, brushing her hair back from her face. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'll come back for you." Then he stood, his fists clenched, and faced the alien warrior. The commander charged, its blade cutting through the air with a roar. The man dodged, the heat of the weapon burning across his skin. He grabbed the alien's arm, twisting, but the creature was too strong. It threw him across the corridor, his back slamming into the wall. Pain exploded in his ribs. He gasped for air, but forced himself to rise. He could not stop now. The alien came again, swinging the blade. This time, the man stepped inside the arc, driving his fist into the creature's throat. It staggered, but not enough. The blade swung again, grazing his side. He cried out, blood spilling, but he grabbed the alien's wrist with both hands and forced it toward the wall. With a shout that shook his throat raw, he slammed the blade into the wall, sparks flying. The commander roared, twisting, but the man would not let go. He drove his knee into its chest, again and again, until the alien collapsed. The blade clattered to the floor. The man picked it up, the weapon humming in his hands. He looked at the commander's broken body, then back at the woman. His chest rose and fell with ragged breath. He whispered, "First blood," and tightened his grip on the blade. The war had only begun. The man stood in the smoking corridor, chest heaving, the humming blade clenched tight in his bloody hands. The alien commander lay broken at his feet, its red eyes dimming to black. The woman he had saved still sat against the wall, her breath shallow, her strength fading. For a long moment, silence filled the space, only the low hum of the ship around them and the faint beeping of alarms carried through the air. He wiped blood from his face, though he wasn't sure if it was his own or the alien's. He looked down at the blade, glowing faintly blue, and knew one thing: this was no longer just survival. This was war. He sheathed the weapon across his back, its weight heavy but steady. Then he knelt beside the woman. Her lips were cracked, her eyes half open. She tried to speak but no sound came out. He pressed her hand gently and whispered, "I'll get us out. Hold on." He wanted to believe it himself, though he had no map, no plan, no idea where he even was inside the massive alien ship. But he could not let her die here. He could not let any of them die here. He lifted her again, cradling her against his chest, and continued down the corridor. The alarms had shifted, their tone deeper now, like a warning spreading through the ship. Somewhere far above, he could hear the thundering march of alien reinforcements. He knew more would come. He had little time. At the next junction, he found something that stopped him cold, a wide chamber filled with glowing screens. The walls were covered in shifting alien symbols, maps, and diagrams. He stepped closer, careful not to set the woman down too hard, and squinted at one of the screens. At first, the alien writing was meaningless. But then his eyes caught the shape of something familiar, a star. His breath caught. It was a map of systems, with dots marking planets and routes between them. At the edge of the map, small icons pulsed red. He recognized the outline of Earth. His heart pounded. The aliens had charted Earth. They had come for his people deliberately. His mind raced with questions. How many had they taken? How long had they been watching? But the answers would not come here. What mattered now was escape. He forced himself to look at another display, one that showed the ship itself. It was massive, a floating fortress, with dozens of decks and compartments. But one glowing section caught his eye. A hangar. Small ships were stored there. His only chance. He memorized the path as best he could, tracing it with his eyes, downward corridors, 3 levels below. That was his escape route. He turned, ready to move, but a sound stopped him. The woman whispered weakly, her eyes half open, "Others." She lifted a trembling hand toward the map of pods marked on the screen. He froze. She was right. He could not run without trying to free them. Rage surged in his chest. He pressed her hand gently back down. "I'll come back for them. I promise." But deep inside, he knew promises meant little in a place like this. He had to find a way to burn the entire lab down, to set them all free or die trying. The door behind him hissed, and he spun just in time. More guards rushed in, their rifles raised. He pulled the blade from his back, its hum vibrating through his arm. The aliens shouted, but he didn't wait for them to fire. He charged. The blade cut through armor like paper, slicing the first guard in 2. The others fired wildly, bolts slamming into the walls, into their own comrades. The man ducked low, his movements faster now, as if the fire inside him grew stronger with every strike. He carved through another guard, then spun and drove the blade into the chest of a third. The corridor filled with screams, smoke, and the metallic stench of blood. When it was over, he stood panting in the middle of the carnage, his arms shaking. The woman had slid down against the wall, her eyes wide, watching him not with fear but with awe. He looked at her, then at the blade in his hand, and realized what the aliens feared all along. It wasn't just his strength. It was his will. They had tried to break it, but they had failed. He wiped the blade against a fallen guard's armor, then lifted the woman again. Step by step, he pushed toward the hangar. He passed more rooms filled with pods, filled with silent human faces staring out at him. He whispered under his breath, "Soon. I'll free you soon." Finally, after endless corridors, he found a massive door marked by glowing alien runes. He pressed his hand against the panel. The door slid open, and his breath caught. The hangar stretched out before him, vast and glowing with strange lights. Dozens of alien ships rested on the floor, sleek and sharp like predatory birds. Engineers scattered at the sight of him, dropping their tools and fleeing into the shadows. His eyes burned with sudden hope. Here was his way out. But hope was fragile. From the far end of the hangar, heavy footsteps echoed. He looked up and saw lines of war drones unfolding from the ceiling. Their metal bodies gleamed in the light, their weapons humming. More guards poured in through side doors, their voices a chorus of fury. The man's grip on the blade tightened. His body was torn, bleeding, exhausted, but his eyes held fire. He set the woman down carefully behind a stack of crates, kissed her forehead once more, and whispered, "Stay hidden. I'll end this." Then he stepped into the open, the blade glowing in his hand, facing the army waiting for him. The hangar trembled with the storm about to break. The escape route was in front of him, but to take it, he would have to turn this place into a battlefield. The hangar shook with the roar of machines as the war drones unfolded from the ceiling, their eyes glowing red, their weapons humming with deadly energy. Rows of alien soldiers stood between the man and the waiting ships, their armor black, their claws gripping rifles that pulsed with light. The air was hot, thick with the smell of oil and plasma. The alarms blared louder, echoing off the high walls. The man stood alone, blade in hand, his bare chest covered in blood and sweat. He looked at them all, drones, soldiers, machines, and felt no fear. He only felt rage. He turned once, glancing back at the woman hidden behind the crates. She lay curled in the shadows, her eyes half open, watching him with silent trust. He nodded to her, then stepped forward. The blade hummed louder, glowing brighter, as if feeding on his fury. The drones fired first. Beams of light slashed through the air, scorching the floor. The man darted forward, faster than he thought possible. He rolled beneath the blasts, the blade carving upward. Sparks flew as he split the nearest drone in half, its pieces crashing to the ground. He didn't stop. He leapt onto another, driving the blade straight through its core, then kicked off before it exploded. The hangar lit with fire, smoke curling into the air. The soldiers charged next, rifles blazing. Bolts of plasma seared past him, burning his arms and chest, but he didn't slow. He spun the blade in wide arcs, deflecting some shots, dodging others. He slammed into the first soldier, tearing its weapon away and driving the blade through its chest. He pulled it free, spun, and cut down another. The sound of his battle cry echoed through the hangar, drowning out the alarms. Explosions shook the floor as drones crashed into each other, caught in their own crossfire. The man seized the moment, sprinting toward the nearest stack of fuel tanks. He slashed them open, sparks igniting the leaking gas. A fireball erupted, throwing soldiers off their feet, ripping metal from the walls. The hangar became chaos. Screams, fire, gunfire, all mixing into a storm. He fought like a man possessed. Every step he took left a trail of destruction. He smashed drones with their own broken parts, hurled soldiers into burning wreckage, and carved through anything that moved. The aliens tried to regroup, tried to hold their lines, but he was everywhere at once. A shadow of fury. A storm of blood. From the far side of the hangar, alien commanders barked orders, their voices frantic. The man caught sight of a control station glowing with lights. His mind sparked with an idea. If he could reach it, he could lock the doors, trap the soldiers inside, and burn them all. He ducked behind a fallen drone, racing through the smoke toward the station. 2 guards blocked his path, their rifles aimed. He hurled the humming blade, spinning it through the air. It sliced one in half, embedding itself in the wall. Before the second could fire, the man tackled it, grabbing its throat and snapping it with his bare hands. He yanked the blade free and slammed his fist into the console. Sparks flew, screens cracked, and the alarms shifted tone again. The heavy doors of the hangar slammed shut with a deafening boom. The aliens screamed, realizing too late they were trapped with him. He activated another switch, and massive cranes above dropped loose equipment onto the floor. Fuel lines burst, spilling fire across the hangar. The place became a furnace. The man moved like a ghost in the smoke, striking from the shadows, his blade flashing with firelight. One by one, the soldiers fell, their screams swallowed by the roar of flames. The woman coughed weakly from behind the crates, covering her face from the heat. The man ran to her, lifting her once more into his arms. The fires raged around them, explosions rocking the floor, but his eyes locked on a small ship near the far wall, a sleek vessel, untouched by the chaos. He pushed forward, cutting down the last soldiers who dared to block his path. As he reached the ramp, he turned back once more, staring at the burning hangar. The alien fortress shook with fire, alarms screaming across every corridor. He whispered, his voice low but fierce, "This is not your lab anymore. This is a war zone." With the woman in his arms, he climbed aboard the ship. He laid her gently on a seat, then stumbled toward the controls. The symbols on the console glowed, alien and strange, but he pressed buttons, pulled levers, forcing the systems to life. The engines roared, vibrating beneath his feet. The hangar bay filled with smoke as the ship rose slowly off the ground. Behind him, the fire consumed everything. Drones crashed into the walls. Soldiers screamed as flames swallowed them. The entire lab shook as secondary explosions tore through the structure. The man gripped the controls, forcing the ship forward, toward the sealed hangar doors. He slammed a fist against the console, shouting in rage. The doors cracked, metal bending under pressure. With a final blast of energy, they shattered open. The ship burst into the void of space, leaving the burning hangar behind. The stars stretched out before him, endless and cold. The man slumped in the pilot's chair, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. The woman lay weak but alive behind him. The blade still hummed at his side, glowing with firelight. But he knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning. The aliens would hunt him. They would chase him across the stars. But he had turned their prison into a battlefield. He had shown them what it meant to fight a human. And he would not stop until every cage was broken. The stars stretched wide and endless, but peace did not follow. The stolen alien ship trembled as warning lights blinked red across the console. The man gripped the controls, sweat dripping down his face, as the engines coughed and groaned. Behind him, the woman lay weak, her breathing shallow. She stirred once, whispering words he couldn't understand. He placed a hand gently on her arm, then turned back to the dark void ahead. A shadow appeared in space. Then another. Then dozens. Alien ships, sleek and black, slid out of hyperspace, surrounding him like hunters closing in on prey. Their weapons glowed with red light, their engines howled like thunder. The man's stolen vessel shook as targeting alarms screamed in his ears. He was trapped. He clenched his jaw. The aliens thought he would run, thought he would hide. They thought he was just another escaped subject. But he had turned their lab into a war zone. He had burned their fortress to ash. And now, even in the cold void, he would not bow. The console flickered with alien text. He didn't know the language, but his fingers moved instinctively, pressing buttons, pulling levers. The ship's systems roared to life, cannons unfolded, shields shimmered, and engines flared. He wasn't just flying a stolen vessel. He was flying their weapon against them. The first enemy ship fired. A bolt of plasma streaked past, grazing his shield. The impact rattled the vessel, sparks falling from the ceiling. The man gritted his teeth, yanked the controls, and dove between two ships. The cannons spat fire, shredding one vessel into burning pieces. The explosion lit the dark like a second sun. But more came. Dozens more. Plasma rained down from every angle, shaking his ship, tearing holes through its armor. He twisted and turned, dodging as best he could, firing back with everything he had. He fought like he had in the lab, wild, furious, unstoppable. For every strike he took, he gave one back. For every ship that hunted him, another burned in his fire. Yet he knew he could not fight forever. The ship's alarms screamed louder, red lights flashing across every screen. Systems failed one by one. Shields weakened. Engines sputtered. Smoke filled the cockpit. He coughed hard but kept his grip tight. He would not surrender. Not now. Not ever. The woman's voice came again, weak but clear. He turned, and her eyes glowed faintly, strange and bright, as if something alien pulsed inside her. She raised a trembling hand, pointing to the blade lying by his side. The weapon still hummed, glowing stronger with every battle. He grabbed it, feeling its heat surge into his hand. The ship responded instantly, its systems flared brighter, weapons hummed louder, engines roared. He realized the truth. The blade was not just a weapon. It was a key. A power source. Maybe even alive. With a roar, he slammed the blade into the console. Energy exploded across the ship, flooding every system. The vessel screamed like a beast awakened, its weapons firing in every direction at once. Plasma cannons, missiles, beams of pure light, the ship unleashed everything in a storm of destruction. Alien vessels burst like glass under fire, one after another, until the battlefield was filled with burning wreckage. The man shouted with fury as he guided the ship forward, cutting a path through the enemy fleet. Explosions lit the void around him, shaking space itself. He was one man, but he fought like an army. He was one stolen ship, but he burned a fleet. But the aliens were endless. More ships warped in, larger this time, massive carriers with glowing weapons the size of cities. The man's stolen ship shook under their presence, the power of the blade straining the systems. He felt the vessel breaking apart, piece by piece, but he didn't stop. He turned once more to the woman. Her faint smile met his eyes. She whispered again, her voice soft but filled with strange strength. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. It was not about survival. It was about defiance. It was about showing the galaxy what a human could do. The man pulled every lever, slammed every button, forcing the ship to its limits. The blade glowed so bright it burned his hands, but he held it firm, screaming as the vessel charged forward. The alien carriers opened fire, a storm of plasma raining down. The ship dove through, shields breaking, armor tearing, alarms shrieking. And then, impact. The stolen vessel slammed into the largest carrier, the blade's energy surging through the hull like lightning. The explosion was blinding, ripping through the carrier, tearing it apart from the inside. Shockwaves spread across space, smashing into the nearby fleet, scattering them in chaos. Fire bloomed in the void, brighter than the stars. The man's vision blurred, his body broken from the force. The cockpit shook violently, metal tearing around him. He turned one last time to the woman. Her glowing eyes locked onto his. She smiled again, weak but proud. The ship burned. The carrier collapsed. The fleet broke apart. And in the silence of space, the story of one human echoed louder than the war itself. They would tell it as a legend. The human who woke up in a lab, who turned it into a war zone, who stole their weapon, and who destroyed a fleet with his bare hands. He was no subject. No experiment. He was defiance. He was fury. He was survival. And the galaxy would never forget.